Hiroja Shibe here with another thought bubble. I've got my tinfoil hat on because it's tinfoil time. With the FOMO going on with like Korea, a little bit of India, but like the Korea exchanges, uh, people taking advantage of that. China, the U.S. legislation looking, or at least the Senate committee is going to, financial committee is going to have some blockchain experts uh, talk about blockchain. One sec. Gotta get my coffee. I thought I'd have a fun little story and then kind of break it down why I think it's important. Um, this is a post that kind of pulled up into my Twitter feed. It's been passed around quite a bit over the years in the Bitcoin community, cryptocurrency community in general, but mostly the Bitcoin community. It started off in Our Bitcoin about 4 years ago, so around 2013, really-ish, this post came up. And it's by a Reddit user called Luca Magneto. And it says, "I'm a time traveler from the future, here to beg you to stop what you're doing." So, I'm sending this message from the year 2025. Oh, I wish I could play some dramatic music for y'all. Things are looking bleak here, and some of you will carry blood on your hands. If you don't believe me, please move on, as I have no way of proving to you I'm really who I claim to be. I don't want to waste any of your time, so I'm really going to explain what happened. On average, every year so far, the value of Bitcoin has increased about a factor of 10, from $0.1 in 2010 to $1 in 2011 to $10 in 2012 to $100 in 2013. From now on, there's a slight slowdown as the value increased by a factor of 10 every 2 years to 1,000 in 2015, to 10,000 in 2017, 100,000 in 2019, and a million in 2021. From here on out onwards, there's no good way of expressing the value in dollars, as dollars is no longer used, nor is any central bank issued currency for that matter. There are two main forms of wealth in today's world: land and cryptocurrency. There are just over 19 million Bitcoin known to be used in the world today, as well as a few 100,000 that are permanently lost, and we're still dealing with a population of just over 7 billion people today. On average, that means the average person owns just under 0.003 Bitcoin. However, due to the unequal distribution of wealth in my world, the mean person owns just 0.01 Bitcoin. That's right, most of the people you're reading this today are rich. I personally live next to an annoying young man who logged into his old Reddit account 2 years ago and discovered that he received a tip of 0.01 Bitcoin back in 2013 for calling someone a faggot when he was a 16-year-old boy. Upon making this discovery, he bought an airline ticket, left his house without telling anyone anything, and went to a citadel. What is a citadel? You might wonder, well, by the time Bitcoin becomes worth $1,000, services begin to emerge for the Bitcoin rich to protect themselves as well as their wealth. It started with expensive safes and began to include bodyguards, and today, earlies, our term for early adopters, as well as those rich whose wealth survived the transition, live in isolated gated cities called citadels, where most work is automated. Most such citadels are born out of the fortification used to protect places where the Bitcoin mining machines are located. The company known as ASIC Miner to you is known to me as a city where Mr. Friedman rules as king. In my world, soon to be your world, most governments no longer exist, as Bitcoin transitions are done anonymously, and thus most governments can enforce no taxation on their citizens. Most of the success of Bitcoin is due to the fact that Bitcoin turned out to be an effective method to hide your wealth from the government. Whereas people entering rogue states like Luxembourg, Monaco, and Liechtenstein were followed by unmanned drones to ensure the governments know who's hiding wealth, no such option was available to stop people from hiding their money in Bitcoin. Governments try to stay relevant in my society by buying Bitcoin, which just made the problem worse by increasing the value of Bitcoin. Governments did so in secret, of course, but my generation's Snowdens are in fact greedy government employees who transferred Bitcoin to their own private account and escaped to an anarchic place where no questions are asked as long as you can cough up some money. The four institutions with the largest still accessible Bitcoin balances are believed to be the following: ASIC Miner, 50,000 Bitcoin; the IMF Currency Stabilizer Fund, 70,000 Bitcoin; Government of Saudi Arabia, 110,000 Bitcoin; and North Korean government, 180,000 Bitcoin. Economic growth today is about negative 2% per year. Why is that? If you own more than 0.01 Bitcoin, chances are you don't do anything with your money. There is no inflation, thus no incentive to invest your money. Just like the medieval ages had no significant economic growth as wealth was measured in gold, our society has no economic growth either, as people know that their 0.01 Bitcoin will be enough to last them a lifetime. The fact that there's still new Bitcoin release is what prevents our world from collapse. So far it seems. But people fear that the decline in inflation that will occur during the next block halving may further wreck our economy. What happened to the Facebook twins? I can never say their name. The Facebook twins were among the first to die. After seeing the enormous damage done to the fabric society, terrorist movements emerged that sought to hunt down and murder anyone known to have a large balance of Bitcoin or believed to be responsible in any way for the development of cryptocurrency. Ironically, these terrorist movements use Bitcoin to anonymously fund their operations. Most people who own any significant amount of Bitcoin no longer speak to their families and lost their friends because they have to change their identities. There have also been a few suicides of people who could not handle their guilt after seeing what happened to the bag holders, the type of skeptical people who continue to believe it would eventually collapse. Even after hearing the rumors of governments buying Bitcoin, many people were taken hostage, and thus it is suspected that 25% of the Bitcoin rich actually physically tortured someone to get him to spell his password. Why don't we abandon Bitcoin and move to another system? Well, we tried, of course. We tried to step over to an inflationary cryptocurrency, but nobody with an IQ above 70 was willing to step up and first and volunteer. After all, why would you volunteer to invest a lot of your money into currencies where you know your wealth will continually decline? The thing that made Bitcoin so dangerous to society was also what made it so successful. Bitcoin allows us to give it into our greed. In Africa, surveys show that estimated 70% of people believe that Bitcoin was invented by the devil himself. There's reason for this. It's a very sensitive issue that's totally generally referred to as the tragedy. The African Union had ambitious plans to help its citizens be ready to step over to Bitcoin. Governments gave their own citizens cell phones for free, tied to the government ID, and thus governments sought to integrate Bitcoin into their economy. All went well until the tragedy, that is, a criminal organization believed to be located in Russia exploited a hardware fault in the government-issued cell phones. It's believed the entire continent of Africa lost an estimated 60% of its wealth period over 48 hours. What followed was a period of chaos and civil war until the Saudi Arabian and North Korean governments, two of the world's major superpowers due to their authoritarian political systems, unique ability to adapt to the Bitcoin challenge, divided most of African land between themselves and were praised as heroes by the local African population for it. You might wonder, what is our plan now? It's clear that the current situation cannot be sustained without ending in a nuclear holocaust. I'm part of an underground network who seek to launch a coordinated attack against the very infrastructure of the internet itself. We have at our disposal about 20 nuclear submarines, which we'll use to cut all underwater cables between different continents. After this has been successfully achieved, we will launch a simultaneous nuclear pulse attack on every densely population area of the world. We believe that the resulting chaos will allow the world's population to rise up in revolt and destroy as many computers out there as possible until we reach the point where Bitcoin loses any relevance. Of course, this outcome will likely lead to billions of deaths. This is a price we are forced to pay to avoid the eternal enslavement of humanity to a tiny elite. This is also the reason we contacted you. It doesn't have to be like this. You don't have to share your fate, our fate. I don't know how, but you must find a way to destroy this godforsaken project in its infancy. I know this is a difficult thing to ask you. You believe you were helping the world by eliminating the central banking cartel that governs your economies. However, I have seen where it ends. So there's a lot in here to unpack, okay? And what makes the best stories, great, are those that have truths interwoven in them. So, for example, the increasing price of Bitcoin, being tenfold. Pretty much all these markers occurred. 2015, I think, is when we were close to like $1,000. 2015. Let me double check. Go with the price history. I know 2017 we hit almost 20K, so we definitely hit this person's predictor. So crypto, Bitcoin, I think it's on price history. So 2015. Hold on. That does not do me any good. Create a Bitcoin graph. it's under complete price history chart 2009 to 2018. It's on 99 Bitcoins. So it's actually 99 Bitcoins is actually a pretty decent site. I mean, they could do a little bit better with some of their articles that they post up, but for the most part, they've been consistently pretty good. So, all right, so it's 2015. We had 352, 331. I think this is when we were in the doldrums, 2015. So we didn't hit 1,000. I don't think we hit 1,000 until we got into 2016. So it's a little off. No, actually it was 2017 we hit 1,000. So 2017, and then we had the exponential growth that we're currently going on right now. So it's off in its metrics. I think if the Mt. Gox hadn't happened, there's a strong probability that this future teller, storyteller, his predictions would have been correct. It would be a matter to see whether or not we get to that 100,000 in 2019. There's been a lot of, I would say, big institutional messing around with the market, and just some really stupid moves on the part of some of these legacy Bitcoin companies that are not going to be here, I think, in 2 years. One of them being Coinbase, Coin Market Cap. I talked about it in a previous video about, you know, this porting over ETFs and exchanges and stuff like that, and depending on information from just one single company to tell you the market price, which is Coin Market Cap or website, is ridiculous. I think we're going to start seeing more these sites build up to, you have all these 100 different types of sites and exchanges, decentralization, and really start getting to what the real value of each of these cryptocurrency coins are. But continuing forward, I think the 19 million Bitcoin is a little bit high. The breakdown prediction is pretty true. Now, the whole concept of the Citadel, that's actually kind of happening already, just in the tech industry in general. Just Google like bug out houses or bug out packs, and you'll find like all sorts of tech investors or tech rich guys have these bug out places or apartment or houses out in the middle of nowhere or land somewhere that if the government comes or collapses, they can survive the society. Many of these tech guys also have bodyguards and stuff like that because they're targets because of their wealth. And I think you're starting to see that happen with the bodyguard situation with some Bitcoiners and some cryptocurrency guys, simply because someone, I forget which country it was, I think it was Turkey. This guy was kidnapped and had to give up his access codes, his information, passwords, and his Ethereum was stolen ahead of an exchange. So, and there's been people that have been kidnapped and held at gunpoint to give up their passwords. I saw a recent story where a roommate had hired someone to get, not a roommate, but a friend of somebody had hired someone to get the password information from this guy's Ledger wallet, target him, I think where he is at work or some other place, so he can go to his apartment and get his Ethereum. So stuff like that is happening already. Suicides have happened a little bit, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that people lost money. Not necessarily the guilt, if you will, for having this money and what the fabric of change of society. But it's interesting. He's saying Mr. Freedom is going to be ahead of these type of citadels. These kind of do happen already if you're part of a homeowners association. They do kind of run like a freedom, particularly depending on what type of the structure of your homeowners association and who gets voted in. It can kind of get very little bit dictatorial, if you will. That's why I personally don't like gated communities or homeowners association in general. I don't think there should be a collective group, another additional collective group telling me what to do with my property. Okay, so whole government is no longer existing. That's not gonna happen. I do think there will be rogue states. You kind of, sort of, somewhat seeing that, where people thinking they're going to go to Thailand or Singapore or maybe Estonia as safe havens for their crypto to be able to transact and interact with cryptocurrency and not pay taxes or have to worry about that, if you will. Governments try to stay relevant by buying Bitcoin. We're seeing that with Bulgaria, where they didn't buy, but they seized Bitcoin and basically keeping it and not handing it over to the rest of their European partners. If you're unfamiliar with the Bulgaria story, they had seized some Bitcoin from a dark net drug bust and is now estimated to be worth in the value of 3.9 billion. They had seized 213K plus in Bitcoin, and it was a joint judicial effort within the European. They're part of the European Union. Some of these European agencies, one of them is already, but pretty sure soon others have asked Bulgaria to cough up those Bitcoin to be, so I guess they can be sold or whatever. And Bulgaria is like, what Bitcoin? You know, so I think you're gonna start seeing that. There's always this rumor about North Korea, but I haven't seen any viable, consistent or really hard number data points, if you will, of them having a minor operation. They're allegedly hacking different exchanges, particularly South Korea, which might be true, but the whole mining thing, I'm not sure. I think that's a little wishful thinking. But definitely the hacking stuff, that's just something that North Korea and just in general the Russians do. Oh, so this whole inflation thing, this is an economic principle where if you don't have inflation, people are not going to be incentivized to spend. I think the whole economic concept of the medieval ages has gone back and forth of whether or not the gold was responsible for the slow economic growth and innovation of the Middle Ages. A lot of it, they had a lot going on. They had, theocratic governments, constant warfare, a series of different plagues or issues, like famine, farming stuff. A lot of that could have contributed to the stagnation of growth in the Middle Ages more so than the spending of gold. I mean, gold has been around for ages, and yet you have great civilizations like Egypt and Rome and the Greeks, China, the Chinese, different dynasties, India, pretty much everyone was operating on a gold system, yet they were able to build infrastructure and roads and civilizations of that nature. They also used silver and copper and other assets, but gold too was a primary source of exchange of value and medium and unit of account. So not only that, but there was other civilizations that grew during that period of time in the Middle Ages, particularly India and China flourished. Different civilizations in Africa, different countries flourished and grew, just not Europe. And a lot of it had to do with farming techniques, plagues, constant warfare, and things of that nature, in a very theocratic, oppressive infrastructure of religion, if you will. Even the fragmentation of religion that did occur, even though the Catholic Roman Holy Empire was, the dominant force, there was different strains even within the Catholicism and how interpretation, if you will. It wasn't quite as a solid footing as some would think. But anyways, so I guess that's going to be the test of Bitcoin, of whether or not growth will still occur with an economic system that doesn't have a built-in inflation into it. So the Facebook twins. This could be a possibility of people. Again, this story interweaving possibilities and truths. Things that could likely occur and have some truths behind them, which makes this very fascinating. I'm not sure if terrorism would be the thing. I do think that, just criminal activity, targeting, snatching people, things of that nature, which is already occurring, may in fact happen. But for order for the terrorist movement to emerge, and it takes time for political movements to emerge in any given society. And normally, typically, when an issue arises, it takes a generation really for you to see some kind of traction or movement against something. because the generation that's dealing with it or has experienced it first is building the blocks that's going to allow for the next generation to take up the mantle and be able to successfully, attack the issue or problem, whether it be through non-violent means or revolutions or terrorist actions. So, I think that's just too broad strokes for me. I do think this happens a lot with new money growth, new money industries where people do disconnect themselves from family members and friends, simply because they have the wealth and their family doesn't, and they're either asking them or seeking some piece of the wealth or whatever. And some people have issues with that, some people don't. It really just depends on your family dynamics, but I do see that happening. It'd be interesting to see what, at the end of the day, what percentage of Bitcoin holders are a result of scams, hacking, outright, thefts, or even physical thefts. How many of them are actually, that percentage of that Bitcoin rich got their money that way instead of by mining, trading, or development or earning Bitcoin, or buying and holding. So this whole anyone above the IQ over 70 was the first to volunteer for inflationary currency, I think it's a bit bullshit. I don't think you have to factor intelligence is one factor. Emotional, people get very emotional even though they're very intelligent about certain things. You already see people doing that with certain cryptocurrencies. Dogecoin is one of those, but other cryptocurrencies, I don't think that's the case. I think this was made before Ethereum really got onto the board and development, even though Litecoin had already existed. I don't think that's the case. And I think that what we will see in this new emerging economic system, again, is the whole concept: does inflation propel investment and spending? So this whole Africa thing, I think this is a very legitimate potential scenario. Estonia is one of these countries that has, everything all digitized. There are like 1.3 million Estonians. They're a very small country. Their infrastructure, if you will, is based around tech from a very young age, from kindergarten on up. But when you tie everything digitally, you could have Russians are the bad guys in this situation, steal the wealth of a nation, steal the wealth of individuals and people. And it's all about, security and securing and owning your private currency. And when everything is tied to a centralized authority like a government, this could potentially happen. It could happen to a country in Africa. It could happen to anywhere in South America. It could happen here. These are things that people are seeking to develop and try to do, but again, it's about the central point of failure and the access and the scale of the points of attack, whether or not this type of system with the current technology we have, look at the hardware issues we're having with the Intel chip, which, tinfoil here for a moment. Okay, so there's been a lot of people talking about this whole meltdown of Spectra, which basically, to sum it up, is the whole, the Intel and ADM chips. Basically, it just access your entire information through a backdoor through the hardware. It doesn't matter what type of software you have. The hardware chip is just going to give you up. Now, there are those who think that this is incompetence on the level of Intel and ADM and some of these other manufacturers. There's others who think that maybe this was a deliberately built-in backdoor for governments like the NSA. Or there's the third people that are like, well, Intel really didn't know. Might have been something done by the influences of these outside agencies to get their, in essence, Clipper chip installed in pretty much every device in the world, by either subverting the manufacturing process, the coding, inserting stuff, and are disguising this this vulnerability so that it wouldn't be found by the company. Lots in the air. What is true is the fact that I think Intel knew about this, was made aware of it pretty early on, and has still done really nothing. They didn't really disclose it to the clients. I know there's patches coming up the wazoo from all sorts of different places. But, yeah. Um, so, yeah. I'm leaning towards the fact that Intel was not aware and that this was a subversion on the part of a government that was able to subvert the hardware process, which speaks to the level of penetration on the part of government and pretty much all sorts of media infrastructure. I mean, we've had declassified information where the CIA was, Hollywood and all these different businesses. So it's not something new. It's something they've done before. This is something that people thought they were not doing any longer, but obviously not. And we'll see. We'll see how things all shake out. Okay, so then we get to the whole doomsday scenario. 20 nuclear submarines, not possible. The moment you steal one, even if you do a simultaneously theft, you're going to be hunted throughout the oceans. There's so many goddamn satellites. Knowing that, but all they have to do is, I think Hubble's still up in the sky. But some of these other satellites that are up there, they can just pivot and move them and just to search for these subs. Because it would be paramount for the existence of everyone to find them. So you got drones, you got everyone who would never cooperate with one another, launching, whether they have 5 ships or 6 rowboats, looking for these subs. So, not possible. They would have been found so quickly. Not to mention, I think there's even, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of remote access shutdown code to prevent rogue theft, or at least shut down the nukes to make them inoperable, where you have to basically dismantle the entire infrastructure of the warhead in order to pull out the fusion or the nuclear material, and then you would have to put that material into an already ready-made device. We'll see. But makes for a great movie. So let's see. Yes, the outcome would be death of billions. Never a solution for any type of problem. Unless it's zombies, aliens. Pretty much zombies and aliens. Eternal enslavement of humanity to tiny elite. So yeah, this is an infrastructure problem that has been kind of talked about, but not really, where within the cryptocurrency space, with early adopters, with people that have been around for a while, or even some of the noobs are getting into the space, that are we playing a game of musical chairs? Are we just basically creating our own elites? We'll be the new elites of the future. And is that a good thing? Because the problem and the reason why people got into this space is because of the elites having control of too much everything. So what it sums down to is, while the current economic system is a very controlled economic system, where the elites kind of control, there's a very few people who control everything. Are we in essence duplicating that within the cryptocurrency, where we're creating another type of controlled economic system, but we're in charge? So basically the concept boils down to a bad idea, where everyone thinks that if they're in charge of a bad idea, it's going to work, instead of acknowledging that it's a bad idea, maybe we need to go toss the paperwork and start over again. So it's something that's kind of bantered around in different forms and different formats and stuff like that. I think it's a pause, something to pause and talk about within the cryptocurrency community in general. Overall, is, are we becoming the elites that we are advocating against? And I don't think that's a good thing. Again, just simply because you're in charge of the bad idea does not mean that bad idea is going to somehow magically work because you're the great solutioner or the great problem solver. But no, whatever. So that's why the person reached out to talk to us, that by taking down the central banking cartel, we caused a whole slew of problems that made the world worse. Which some people have been saying for a while, that maybe Bitcoin might end up doing that, particularly going to a cashless society. A cashless society is something that we're pretty much almost there, really, is that we should still have cash. And if you just look at the homeless situation, you look at small buying or giving, or the fact as everything you're doing is pretty much digitally tracked, that it's not a very good thing. cash is a way of not necessarily hiding it, but you should, everyone and anyone should be knowing your business. So the one thing that he did kind of going about hiding, skipped over, was a whole, well, because of Bitcoin, the government's couldn't tax you, and this is bullshit. They'll find a way, and the way it is like this. I've talked about this before. Al Capone. One of the reasons, everyone talks about how the IRS got him. Well, the reason why the IRS got him is because they had a snitch. They gave him some books. Prior to that, even though Al Capone was flaunting his wealth, had all these cars, these houses, these fancy clothing and stuff like that, he kept saying people giving him gifts, which is permissible in the tax system. The tax system back in the 20s is not to what it is now. So he was able to evade by saying people give me gifts, people give me this, people give me that, he put it in other people's names, they paid this or that. He was able to move and hide it around. And even though people could see, how do you have this house when you're saying you have this and you keep telling me these gifts, which were perfectly legal for the tax system at the time, there was not really much anyone can do. I think even if people were to say this with cryptocurrency, like when they're in this house or driving around their Lambo, it's just a gift or whatever, they didn't make the purchase themselves or evasive like that. I think really what it will come down to is the government's going to say, how do you have the clothes on your back? How do you have shoes on your feet? How do you have food on your belly? Where's your tax money? And they're going to get really very fascist about it. They're going to come in with one of those merchant guns and just scan all your shit. Everything has barcodes on it. Everything's pretty much trackable wherever you get it, unless you're getting everything handmade. And trace it back to some point of purchase and be like, demonstrate with receipts that you were not the one who purchased this, and this person who gifted to you is going to be the one who's might have to end up paying some kind of tax thing. And it's going to put a tremendous burden on people's families, friends, things of that nature, disclosures and stuff like that. So, pay your taxes. Tax season is now. I'm telling you, crypto, with filing taxes, I'm going to have to sit down and figure out, what it is I'm going to have to do to file. I think that you're going to see a lot of rejections on the part of the IRS with some tax returns saying this is no good, and keep saying it's no good, and you're not going to be paying fines until you disclose your cryptocurrency holdings. I don't think you're going to get around paying taxes. It's never happened, no matter what the tech is, no matter how evasive you are. You can get away for a little bit. Either someone's going to snitch on you, or they're just going to come after you because you're already a known quantity. It's just not going to happen. We'll end up changing the different way of the tax structure, really, because roads, schools, water, education, all that stuff doesn't magically appear or happen, and it has to get paid for. And this whole concept, well, why should blah 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 paying for it? I don't want to get into that political philosophy, but it's just going to change. And what will end up probably happening because of blockchain technologies, we're going to see a lot more efficiency. We're going to see a lot more effectiveness. I think we'll see like a less taxation occurring. This already occurred in Estonia when they went all digital with everything. They did see increasing compliance and taxing, and because of that, because everyone's data was Big Brother's watching, they were able to reduce taxes. They didn't have to take in as much because people were paid. They also were able to get more efficient and eliminate a lot of different types of services. So I think you're going to start seeing that type of dynamic change because of an economic system like Bitcoin, where the incentive will be they have to change, because what are they going to do to collect taxes if it is going to, and it's going to be difficult, if it's going to be that difficult for them to obtain the taxes from these wealth holders, if you will. So that's it. I thought I'd have a little bit of fun because of the FOMO that's going on with Korea and all this stuff. And I think this very 4-year-old post, it's very funny, a bit of a tinfoil thing, highlights some of the qualms and issues and problems that people have with the cryptocurrency space. Some of it is overblown, some of it kind of hits the mark, but these are things that, we should be discussing and talking about within the space. How do we become tax compliant? How do we distribute the cryptocurrencies in general to the masses, where we're not having this tiny elite and having basically a case of musical chairs? Does inflation actually propel and compel spending? And what happens when you have an economic system that's not built on inflation? Will a cryptocurrency be, or a bundle of cryptocurrencies that do have inflation positioned into it, be the solution? Who knows? Only time will tell. Only time will tell if someone's able to steal 20 nuclear submarines and somehow able to cut cable lines and not get hunted to death. We'll see. Obviously, they never saw a hunt for Red October. I mean, come on now. So that's it. Thank you all for watching and listening. And until next time. I'm Hiroja Shive. Like, subscribe, share. You know what to do.